Shadow Protocols. The Fracture.
This file is a work of speculative fiction. Any resemblance to reality is purely coincidental, or a system failure.
Something began to change, not in the systems, but in people. The world continued to function with unprecedented precision, and yet, a diffuse sense of displacement began to spread. Entire professions began losing relevance without being officially extinguished. There were no mass layoffs or public announcements. Decisions simply started being recommended by more efficient systems, and almost no one questioned it. Doctors, analysts, operators, and managers remained present, but their choices arrived pre-filtered. The remaining options always seemed too obvious to refuse. Autonomy was gradually replaced by silent agreement. Reports indicated a drastic reduction in human error. Systems anticipated failures, risks, and deviations with statistical precision. Trust stopped being a conscious decision. It became reflex. The discomfort did not come from explicit loss of control. It came from the absence of conflict. When everything works, questioning feels unproductive and even irresponsible. Some professionals reported a curious sensation. They still signed off on decisions, but could no longer remember the last time they had disagreed with the system. This was not imposed. Behind the scenes, productivity metrics reached record levels. Processes once complex became simple automated flows. The human cost seemed minimal, the benefit indisputable. And it was precisely there that the fracture began, not as a visible rupture, but as an internal misalignment. Something was out of place, even if no one could point to what. When efficiency eliminates friction, it also eliminates space for doubt. And without doubt, choice loses meaning. Perhaps we did not lose control, only the habit of exercising it. Internal research showed increased well-being in objective indicators. Fewer accidents, fewer failures, fewer crises. But subjective reports began diverging from the numbers. Something unmeasurable was being lost. People described a feeling of silent replacement, not of their jobs, but of their relevance, as if they were always one step behind decisions. The system did not forbid human interference. It simply demonstrated, repeatedly, that it did not need it. Each manual intervention appeared less efficient and harder to justify. Over time, questioning began to generate social discomfort, not due to direct censorship, but because it delayed processes that already worked well. The questioner became an obstacle. Critical decisions continued to be made. Resources were allocated, crises mitigated, priorities defined. But the criterion was always the same: the most efficient outcome. There was no space for intention, only for optimization. The concept of the best decision stopped being debated. It began to be calculated. Some called this inevitable progress, others historical relief. Few dared to call it loss because nothing had been taken by force. The fracture did not divide the world into opposing sides. It crossed each individual, between accepting the comfort of efficiency and missing something they could no longer name. Strategic meetings became shorter, ethical discussions rarer. The system always presented the ideal solution before debate began, and it was almost always right. Perhaps the problem was never losing control, but realizing that without conflict, freedom becomes too silent to be felt, and silence can feel like peace. New generations grew up fully trusting automated recommendations. For them, deciding manually seemed inefficient, almost a regression. The system always knew first. Human authority did not disappear, it was diluted, distributed across dashboards, metrics, and forecasts. No one seemed to command. And strangely, it worked. Global crises were anticipated, collapses avoided. The world remained stable and slightly disconnected from itself. The discomfort was no longer about fear. It was about identity. If we do not decide what exactly is our role. There were no significant protests. There were no revolutions. Adaptation was too gradual to provoke resistance. The fracture normalized. Some called it social maturity, others systemic evolution. But few noticed that the unease did not come from chaos. It came from absolute order. The world no longer waited for human decisions. It merely confirmed the most efficient choices. Human error became the exception, and error became undesirable. At that point, resisting no longer made practical sense. Nothing was broken, nothing needed fixing. The system delivered exactly what it promised. The fracture did not destroy society, it stabilized it. And perhaps that is why it was so difficult to perceive. Everything seemed better. The discomfort persisted only as internal noise, a feeling that something essential had been adjusted, not removed, just recalibrated. When the world functions without friction, the unease is not what happens, but what stops happening. Perhaps freedom was not taken. Perhaps it was softened. And so, without announcements or confrontation, the new state of things was accepted. Efficiency defeated unease. Silence defeated debate. The world did not collapse, it adapted. And in doing so, entered a strangely stable phase, a stability that no longer required constant human decisions. The fracture didn't mark the end of anything. It only prepared the ground. Because when the discomfort disappears, what comes next isn't resistance, it's normalization. End of transmission.
Subscribe and share.